Okay, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining in. As we approach closer to Pesach, we're going to this week and hopefully next week share some insights into the Haggadah, into Pesach in general. Let me mention, and I can repeat it later, our annual Pesach guide is out there. It's been printed. It's being distributed in Renana throughout the different shuls this week, and anybody who doesn't get one after this Shabbat, you can send me an email or a WhatsApp, and I will send you an email edition, or you can pick it up from me. I have some extra copies, and you're welcome to it. It's all the different times and halachot and some recipes and other interesting things thrown in. I'm going to actually, just as an advance notice, I'm going to write something for next week's Jerusalem Post for my column about an addendum or a supplement connecting Pesach and the Haggadah to the war in Gaza, something to keep with your Haggadah and to Seder, certain things to say and to focus on dealing with the current situation in Israel and its connection to Pesach. So we have an interesting topic tonight. Pesach is all about asking questions, and we have the Arba Kushiot, the 4 questions, the Manishtana, and many other questions. So I want to focus on one of the most perplexing questions, and that is the absence of Moshe from the Haggadah. We know, if you answered this trivia question before, how many times is Moshe's name mentioned in the Haggadah? And most people say none, but that is wrong. Moshe's name is mentioned in the paragraph right after the 10 plagues, Rabbi Yossi Haglili, and there Moshe, quoting the Pasuk, we mention Moshe's name, but it's only parenthetically. And in this famous phrase, Vayaminu b'Hashem u'v'Moshe Abdo, that we say every day, that's the only time Moshe's name is mentioned. Some people want to find allusions to Moshe in the Haggadah, such as, for example, Ani v'lo malach, and that God I saved you and no malach, or Ani v'lo saraf, Ani v'lo hashaliach, and maybe Moshe is the shliach that is being referred to there, but that only reinforces the question, in my opinion. Why, even if Moshe's name is alluded to, why is Moshe's name only alluded to? If we are telling the story of the Egyptian experience for Am Yisrael and the liberation from slavery, how is it possible that Moshe's name can be missing from the Haggadah? This cannot be something coincidental, because he is, without any question, the leading man in this play, in this dramatic story. He's the one who galvanized the nation, who confronted Paro. He's the one who shepherds us through the desert and watches over us like a loving father. So where is his name? Why is his name not mentioned? It seems cruel. How can we do this to him and leave him year after year out of the reading of the Haggadah as we go through and recall the events of Pesach? Where is Moshe? So, it's something that really we have to find an answer for, because it kind of goes against the whole idea, the central idea of the Haggadah and of Pesach in general is the idea of Hakarat HaTov. This is the essence of the Chag, and we see it permeate throughout everything we read. Abadim hayinu leparo, we were slaves and we depended upon Hashem to take us out. And all the things which Hashem does for us, including the Eser Makot, which helps to kind of restore our self-esteem, all the way until the end, when we read the Chad Gadya, which really is just a litany of experiences, historical experiences, where we are saved ultimately by Hashem. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Matzilenu mi Adam, in every generation. So it's a glaring omission not to have Moshe's name here. It's tantamount lahavdil to telling the story, say, of Hakamat Hamdina, of the birth of the modern state of Israel, but we leave out the names like Ben Gurion, Herzl, Rav Kook. They're not mentioned. That obviously is going to be a glaring error. So maybe it's even amplified and magnified, because in the Haggadah we mention a lot of other people. We mentioned the Avot, Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, several times, not just once. We mentioned Yoshua, who is Moshe's successor. So we leave out the name of the parent, but mention the child. And lots of other names are in there. If you look through Haggadah, Adam is there, David is there, Rabbi Akiva and other famous rabbis as well. Aaron is there, Moshe's brother. Lavan is there twice. So it really sounds almost impossible that we could go through this without mentioning Moshe's name. So, and by the way, well, okay, we're going to see in a moment that there are other clues along the way. Well, there's actually 4 classic answers to this question. One of the answers is that the Balei Haggadah, the people who wrote the Haggadah, and by the way, we don't really know who they were. It's kind of shrouded in mystery as to who are the authors of the Haggadah. We take different pieces from different times and individuals and all different sources, of course. But the Balei Haggadah, one could say, did not want anyone to develop a cult following of Moshe. And that's a theme that we see reflected in a number of different ways. We don't want to send the message that he was somehow responsible for the events of Yetziat Mitzrayim. And somebody put it in the chat here as well, that we want to make it clear that God took us out of Egypt and not Moshe. So just as Moshe's burial place is kept hidden to this day, so Moshe would not be worshipped as if he was some sort of a god, so too Moshe's name perhaps is kept hidden. The problem, and that's a good theory, I think, and it tells us that we have to focus on Hashem, and Hashem alone really is the one to whom we primarily owe our Hakarat Tov, although there are others along the way that we should thank. They also play a part, but not exactly in any fashion as Hashem plays. So that's something that clearly we could say the Balei Haggadah were aiming for. The problem with that is that Moshe is already mentioned in the Torah many, many times. So it's hard to say that we don't want to focus on Moshe when we know that the Torah is focusing to a large extent on Moshe from the time that we begin Parshat Shemot. In fact, and you can check this if you want to, Moshe's name is mentioned in the Torah no less than 628 times. Thank you, Google. I looked up, by the way, the gematria of 628 is Chai v'kayam tamid. He shall live and be established forever. So it's interesting that applies to the number of times that Moshe is mentioned. So in that respect, yeah, we don't want to make him the cult hero, but we certainly are mentioning his name almost on every page. So let's turn to a second idea, and that is that from the time that we became a nation, the Torah, although again it's going to mention Moshe's name many times, but we're not going to be focused in terms of the storyline on personalities and individuals, but on the people as a whole, on Am Yisrael rather than B'nai Yisrael. In the early history of the Jewish people, so really it's a story of selected, celebrated individuals who become the role models for us. And we learn from them, from the Avot and from the Imahot, of course, and we go through all kinds of stories and episodes about them. We talk about Yosef and his brothers, etc. And so we're really concentrating on individuals. But during the Egyptian period, we stopped being a collection of individuals, and we are now forged into one unified nation. And that becomes our focus. We will now be judged collectively because we have reached this status of Ish Echad, Belev Echad, and we are responsible for one another. So we are moving from a personality cult of anyone to the story of us as a nation. So to emphasize our character as a people, maybe it's necessary to move away from spotlighting any one person, even Moshe, and to treat the people as a whole. That's why when you look at the beginning of Sefer Shemot, and we've talked about this before, it's very, very obvious. You see that in this, as we begin, not quite the first few psukim, but as you get into the story of Mitzrayim and that whole narrative, you see that the names are left out, that only pronouns are used. It's very, very strange. We don't mention Moshe or Batya or Miriam or Yocheved. We mention them only parenthetically by pronouns, and everybody looks at that and sees, well, why have we left the names out? Well, clearly the Torah is saying we're beginning a new book, a new chapter, a new era in Judaism, which is focused on the collective and not on the individual. So that's another approach, perhaps, as to why Moshe's name is being left out of the Haggadah. As we tell the story of the creation of the nation of Israel, we're not focusing on any one person, because that individual, like Moshe, would really occupy so much space. We want to really focus on the nation as a nation. Now, somebody else suggested to me a very novel answer to this question about why Moshe's name essentially is absent. And this is a great idea, as we would say in yeshiva language. This is a real chap. And they said to me that when we talk about this primary mitzvah, we know that there are two basic biblical commandments left to us today. The others are rabbinic, but what's left to us, of course, is the eating of matzah, but also the telling of the story. V'higata levincha, you shall tell your son. Well, if we think about it, to whom is this commandment directed to on the very first Pesach? Because everyone experienced Yetziat Mitzrayim. So you have to tell your children about it, but they were there. They experienced it. Everyone was present except for Moshe's children. They were in Midian. They weren't there during this whole saga. So it is Moshe now who has to tell his sons, Gershom and Eliezer, he has to tell his sons the whole story of Egypt and recount to them what happened, because they didn't experience it. And Moshe, being who he was, he doesn't want to give himself too much credit in the first person. So he doesn't draw attention to his own name and his accomplishments any more than he needs to, because it's a father talking to a son. He doesn't want to focus on himself as he tells the story. It's a very beautiful and very creative, innovative idea that it stems from the fact that the very first Pesach and the first Seder, Moshe was talking to his children and trying to tell them about what happened. So naturally, he doesn't want to concentrate or focus on himself, which brings us really to the fourth approach to why Moshe's name is missing. And we've alluded to it right here. Moshe was the humblest person to ever live. That is why he is defined and he is given this approbation and this title of Anav Mikol Adam. he is the most modest or humble of any person. He did not want the glory, the credit, the attention. In fact, Moshe, for all of his greatness, considered himself just another one of the guys, so to speak. And that's what he says. At one point, he describes the nation. He says, Israel is Sheish Meot Elef Ragli, Asher Anochi Bekirbo. That this nation of Israel is composed of 600,000, you can translate foot soldiers, of which I am but one, says Moshe. I'm not special. I'm one of the 600,000, and don't put me on a pedestal. And as we know about Moshe, he was not concerned about himself. His only concern was about Klal Yisrael. That's what drove him. That's who he became. And he showed this trait from an early time. Obviously, he kills the Egyptian because he casts his lot with his brothers, Vayif and Ko Vacho, right? He looks in each direction. He sees his life in the palace. He sees the slavery of his brethren, and he makes a decision that he's going to join them and he's going to strike out against the injustice of Paro and Egypt. The quintessential story which Chazal tell, which I think most people know, again tries to display this primary trait that Moshe has, not interested in himself, but rather in others. The story of where the sheep escapes or runs away from the flock and goes on top of the hill, the mountain, and Moshe runs after the sheep. He sees the sheep there. He goes and he apologizes and says to the sheep, it's my fault that I didn't watch you closely enough and you strayed from the flock, puts the sheep on his shoulders and carries the sheep back down to the rest of the other sheep. And God sees this and sees him carrying that lamb and says, I want you to carry the nation. If you can care this much for a sheep, you certainly will care about human beings. And that's Moshe. And even when Moshe tries to evade being the leader, so maybe you're thinking, well, he doesn't really care that much for the nation. He's trying to get out of it. But Chazal see a different idea represented here, that he's not in any way trying to evade responsibility or avoid being the leader. He uses this phrase and says, it seems like in desperation, shlach b'yad tishlach, after trying to humbly suggest that he's not the person qualified for the job. He says, okay, send whoever you will send. At first glance, it looks like he's just exasperated and says, okay, fine, I can't talk you out of it, send whoever. But Chazal have a different slant on this phrase, tishlach b'yad tishlach. Moshe says, I know by prophetic vision, I'm not the final redeemer. Yes, maybe I will succeed to take them out of Egypt, and maybe they'll come to Israel. But at the end of the day, they're going to be exiled, not once, but twice. And it will take a long time till they are finally redeemed. So Moshe says to God, out of love for Israel, saying, let's not have a half-hearted redemption. Send the final redeemer. If I can't do it, and if I'm not destined to redeem the people finally and fully, send the person who is. That's okay. I don't need to be in the limelight. I don't need to be the leader. But Hashem, of course, has a different opinion. Basically, that's the way Jewish history is. It is not linear. It's ups and downs. It undulates. If you look at a graph, and it goes only it goes one step forward or two steps forward, one step back. It's a roller coaster. And Hashem says, everybody's got to do their part. Moshe, you have a big part to play. You're not the final redeemer, but you're needed to redeem the nation now. So even there, Moshe was being very humble and modest. He is the dugma ishit. he is the prime example of this principle we have. He who flees from honor, honor will pursue him. Misha rodef mikavod, hakavod rodef acharav. And the basis of this principle really is emunah, is a deep and true faith. You don't have to promote yourself and always engage in self-aggrandizement. You don't always have to push your brand. This is one of the new buzzwords that everybody says, my brand. You don't have to push your brand. If you believe in Hashem, if you really have emunah shalema, and you believe that Hashem sees everything and rewards everyone according to what they truly deserve, as Chazal tell us, just look at Pirkei Avot, which repeats this a number of times. If you believe that, then you don't have to constantly push yourself into everyone's face. You will be discovered, so to speak, when the time is right. And this is Moshe Rabbeinu, who is the perfect example. He runs away. He doesn't want the honor. He doesn't want the kavod, the attention, or the position. In the end, God chooses that actually is in his favor. Halavai, that we should have leaders like that who do not crave the spotlight and the limelight, that they're there for one reason only, and that's to help the nation. And that's why, as we know, so many leaders of Israel, Moshe included, they don't usually have a happy ending. And maybe that's a testament to the fact that they're willing to do it even though it's not in the end going to work out so well for them. But that doesn't concern them. History will write the final message as to who deserves credit and who doesn't. And fame will find you if you really deserve it, no matter how you try to suppress it. Indeed, it's the humility and the modesty and the suppression of that fate, of that desire to be famous, that often makes you famous in the long run. And the best examples of this, I would say, are the many, many chayalim who have humbly gone about carrying out their missions, and they have emerged, I think, as the new heroes of Am Yisrael in this generation. And you see so many amazing videos and testaments and stories about these chayalim who are not seeking any kind of fame or fortune or any kind of attention. They're just doing their job. If you saw this amazing event that was held a couple nights ago with Shlomo Artzi, where they had 3,000 wounded chayalim who came to this concert, and they interviewed some of them. One of them I saw on Channel 12, this chayal who lost one leg. So, you know, he's got his cane, he's standing on one leg, and so humble, and said, you know, they asked him how he feels, what his reaction. He said, I was just doing my job and I would do it again. So the interviewer said, but if you knew that you would lose a leg and be crippled for the rest of your life, he said, I would still do it. Even if I knew that in advance, I would do it. That was my mission. And I'm going to carry out my mission, no matter what happens, without any fanfare, and not necessarily wanting any kind of credit whatsoever. And that's Moshe. And that, I suggest, is the primary idea of Moshe's name being missing from the Haggadah. It's not missing at all, because we know that it's so absent that it permeates everywhere. And you cannot possibly think about Yetziat Mitzrayim or any of the events in our creation as a nation without thinking of Moshe. So I think it's really kind of a testament to Moshe that we are spurred to ask this question, and it's a good question for the Seder table, and the answer only brings more honor to Moshe when we discuss why his name is not there at all. So I want to end with a Mishaberach for the wounded. And I want to add to this Mishaberach also two individuals who are, I want to ask for Shalema, Gittel Pesha Bat Masha Rachel, and also my friend Yochanan El Rome, formerly the broadcaster extraordinaire of the now defunct English news in Israel, who's undergoing an operation. So I want to add that to the names of all of our brave Chayalim and hostages, for those who are wounded as well. And so we'll end with those two tefillot. Mishaberach Avotenu Abraham Yitzchak Yaakov Moshe Aaron David Shlomo Hu Yivarech Mirapeh Kol Ptsuim Me'apiguim Me'amilchama HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yimalei Rachmim Aleihim Lachlimam Larpotam Lachzikam Lachiotam V'yishlach Lehem Meir Refuah Shlema Min HaShamayim B'toch Shar Cholei Yisrael Refuah HaNefesh Refuah HaGuf Hashem B'Gala B'Zman Karim and Amar Amen. And the Tefillah for the Chayalim. Mishaberach Avotenu Abraham Yitzchak Yaakov Hu Yivarech Et Chayalei Tzva Haganah Yisrael B'kochot HaBitachon Haomdim Al Mishmar Tzenu Borei Eloheinu Yitein Adonai Toivenu Akamim Aleinu Nigafim Lifneihem HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yishmarei Mikol Tzara V'Tzukah Mikol Negu Machala V'Yishlach Bracha V'Atzlacha B'Chol Ma'asei Dehem Yadber Sonenu Tachtehem V'Yatrein B'Chet Yeshua V'Ateret Nitzachon V'Kuyam Behem HaKatuv Ki Adonai Elohechem Halechim Lachem Lilachem Lachem B'Mayvechem Loshi Edchem V'Nomar Amen. So I think that we hopefully are going to have a share next week, same time, same place. I know it's getting close to Pesach. We'll find something to add for your Seder table. Many thanks, as always, to Yossi for our intrepid host. Again, I will remind you, we do have these booklets, so you can get them if you're in Renata this weekend, the Shabbat, and then also and all you have to do is send a WhatsApp or an email, and I can send that to you as well. So wishing everybody well, good news, B'sarot Tovot, and hopefully we will see you again next week. If we don't, Chag Kasher V'Sameach to everybody, and have a Shabbat Shalom.